Hi, welcome to another video. If you're new to my channel, then I'm Bex and I make videos about Hugo, gentle parenting and lifestyle. So if you love cozy content, then don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the little bell so you know when my videos go up. Before I dive into today's sleep tips, I just wanted to say that the full story of our sleep training journey with Finley is in this video, which I will link below in the description box. I also want to point out that I'm not a sleep expert of any sort. I'm not medically trained. These are just strategies and tips that I picked up from a sleep trainer that we did use to help Finley to get to sleep. So these are just tips from a mum and what worked for me. Okay, so let's get started. Before undertaking any sort of gentle sleep training or sleep training of any sort, I would really highly recommend that you spend a week just doing a simple sleep diary and a feeding diary just to see where the problem spots are. So tip number one then is to make sure that your baby is consuming enough calories within the day. This was a sort of trouble spot for us because we did baby-led weaning with Finley and it was difficult to try and work out how much food he was consuming in a day. That's why I did a basic sort of food and sleep diary with Finley first to sort of get an idea as to how much he was eating. And what I would do is just work out proportionally how much had been taken from the plate, how much had ended up on the floor, and work out roughly whether he'd eaten a third of his meal, half of his meal, 3/4 of his meal. If you are doing baby-led weaning like we did, then I would also really recommend making sure that you're giving your baby good quality, high calorie, good fats. Things like avocados, dairy products, eggs, nut butters, providing there's no sort of allergies, and the same with dairy products really. But just making sure that your baby's consuming good quality, high fat foods. These are an easy way of getting the calories up on a baby that's being baby-led weaned. Tip number two is to move your baby into their own room. Now, I didn't really want to do this at first just because we were up several times a night and I just thought it was really inconvenient having to traipse into the other room and then you may have trouble getting back to sleep. So I completely understand if you're reluctant to doing it. When we moved into his own room at the back of the house, it was a lot quieter. He wasn't being disrupted with any noises in the room. So that is definitely something I would recommend trying. Tip number three is to get a blackout blind for your baby's room. These are really cheap and widely available. We got one from IKEA and I think it was under £10. I'll make sure and I'll leave a link below. The reason why I would recommend having a blackout blind is if your baby is a light sleeper like mine, then the slightest amount of light coming through the curtains, it can really cause havoc with the sleep. Tip number four is to have a bedtime routine. I can completely understand if your baby is like Finley was and it's difficult to put them into any sort of routine. I try to follow Finley's lead and try and put him into a routine based on his sort of patterns, but to be honest they were completely inconsistent and it was very difficult to get him into a sort of routine. I also found that Finley absolutely hated having a bath. From being newborn, he just absolutely hated baths and it made bedtime very difficult because the traditional sort of bedtime routine is bath, feed, book and bed, and he was so distressed by having a bath that it made all the other points of a bedtime routine really difficult to take place. It tends to be a symptom of babies who are refluxy or who have a dairy intolerance. We did initially have the Angel Care baby bath support, but we just found you so distressed in the big bath like that. We changed to, I think it was called the Snuggle baby bath. That definitely changed things and he found having a bath more pleasant. And just being downstairs with the towels by the fire, it broke that habit of him hating the bath. So then we did follow a traditional routine of bath, feed, book and bed. The lady who helped us with Finley's sleep really strongly advised that we broke the link between feeding and sleeping. So that's why in the routine the feed is separated by a book and then bedtime, and we also made sure that the light was on during feeds just so that you can make sure your baby is still awake when they're feeding. Okay, tip number 5, white noise. I found initially that white noise didn't really work for Finley. Then I used a sleep aid called Whisper. I've done a review of that, which I'll leave linked below, and I found that really helped Finley's sleep. And it definitely meant that within a day, Finley had at least one nap, and it was about 15 minutes to 20 minutes in length, whereas beforehand, he just wouldn't nap at all. He would go all day without sleeping. If you're in that predicament, I can recommend the Whisper. However, we did end up with an issue where Finley was reliant on white noise, but then when the white noise naturally turned off, that would sort of wake him up. So what we did instead was have white noise on all night, and we still do. He now can sleep without the white noise on, but we just find he has a deeper sleep if he does have white noise on. So we have a tablet within the room which just plays white noise. The tablet's down the back of the chest of drawers, the light doesn't distract him in any way. And we just experimented with different types of white noise. We used just YouTube videos. He really likes the train noise ones, or rain on window panes. So just experiment with different types of white noise. And if your baby already does have white noise, but they seem to wake up when the white noise naturally comes back off, then I would really recommend just trying white noise all night and see if that helps. Tip 6, taper off night feeds. This is probably one of the more important tips. As long as you are making sure that your baby is consuming enough calories within a day, then you can start to taper the night feeds off, and this will probably make the most difference. Out of all of the tips, this is probably the most scary one for most parents who have a baby with a sleep problem, because you will probably feel that your baby is reliant on that night feed. So what I did was taper his night feeds down by 1 ounce every few days until we were just at 1 ounce, and then when we got to that, we stopped. What we did notice was as long as Finley was having enough calories within the day, he didn't really need that night feed. And although he liked having that in the middle of the night and it was sort of comfort for him, slowly but surely tapering that away, he sort of became used to there being less and less milk until one night there wasn't any milk. I think it took about the space of about 10 days to do that. I was very nervous that first night of him not having a bottle, but to be honest, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, and he didn't make that much of a fuss at all. So tip number 7 is no soothing to sleep. This was a difficult one for me because Finley was a very refluxy and unsettled baby, and I found that sometimes the only way that I could get him to sleep was having him resting on his tummy with me rubbing his back in circles until he was finally dozy enough to then put in his cot. So I think I found this more difficult than Dan did. Dan sometimes used to hold Finley's hand to sleep, which again was an issue. So if this is a situation you were in, I completely understand and sympathise with it. It's really important that your baby learns how to soothe themselves back to sleep, and there isn't really any way of getting around it. It is really important that they learn those skills themselves. So tip number 8, you want to put your baby into the cot dozy but still awake. Sometimes I found that when I did this, Finley would suddenly snap awake and it would have to sort of start all over again. So I do identify with the fact that this can be frustrating. The best way of ensuring those things don't happen is to follow tip number 9, which is to do the gradual retreat approach. This is the critical difference between cry it out methods and gentle sleep training. With cry it out, you would usually put your baby down to sleep and leave the room, and if they cry or if they wake up, then you wouldn't go in straight away and comfort them or soothe them. Whereas with gentle sleep training, one of the strategies you can use to avoid that scenario is to do the gradual retreat method. It's sometimes known as the disappearing chair method. What you would do is put your baby to sleep in the cots. Depending how much of a link they have between being close to you and falling to sleep, you would possibly just put your hand on their back over a period of time, then just be standing beside the cot until you were able to then sit in a chair in the room next to the cot, and then slowly and gradually move the chair so that you're closer and closer towards the doorway. And then finally, over a period of time, you should then just be able to go straight to that chair and then be able to make your exit. The important thing to note with gradual retreat is you have to stay in the room until your baby is definitely asleep. If you try to leave the room before they're fully asleep, you run the risk of disturbing them and waking them up, and then you'll probably have to start all over again. If you're choosing this approach rather than crying it out, you do have to be prepared for the fact that it can take slightly longer. Finley was fully sleep trained, sleeping through the night, consistent naps that were an hour in length at least. It took, I think, just over a month. I would say maybe about 6 weeks. However, what I would say is from putting these strategies into place, there was an immediate dramatic improvement. For example, within the first couple of nights, he was falling asleep pretty much straight away, whereas it was taking us at least an hour to get him to go to sleep before, and he was starting to sleep through till about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And he was like waking up early just because Dan was getting up for work at that time. If you're looking for a shortcut, this approach probably isn't the one for you, but if you're prepared to be patient and it's important to you that you don't go for a cry it out sort of method, then I would say stick with this approach. Tip number 10 is give your baby opportunities to settle themselves. By this I don't mean leave your baby to cry it out. It just means that if they seem to be surfacing in their sleep, don't suddenly go in and try and shush them back to sleep. Just leave them, watch on the monitor to see what they're doing. If your baby does wake up and start crying, by all means then go in and do the gradual retreat strategy again. So stand by the cot, let them know that you're there, or sit in the chair and wait for them to fall asleep again. And then once they're fully asleep, go back out the room. So it just means give your baby opportunity to try to get themselves back to sleep. If they aren't given those opportunities, they're not going to learn how to do it. I hope this video has been helpful. If it has, don't forget to like and share the video. Leave me a comment, let me know how you're getting on. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, if you like my videos, don't forget to head on over to my website, which is bexmassey.co.uk, for more cozy content. And I'll see you soon. Bye!